Welcome back to the Military Breakdown Podcast. Today we're diving into a really interesting development for Air Force Special Operations Command, the arrival of something called the Skyraider II aircraft. It's got the designation OA-1K.
Okay.
So this new aircraft has officially landed at AFSOC, and we're going to unpack pretty much everything. We're going to go from, its journey from the drawing board all the way to the flight line.
Yeah.
We're going to look at what it's supposed to do, what it's designed to do, and of course you can't talk about the Skyraider II without talking about that name and the historical echoes.
Of course, yeah.
And then we'll look at, how it was actually developed and built, what the future holds for it, as far as deployment and training even, and we'll touch on the bigger strategic picture. And then, as always, we'll wrap it up with some questions and considerations that always come along with new military hardware.
Yeah, it's always an exciting time when a new aircraft joins the ranks.
It is.
And this one, the Skyraider II, it's particularly interesting just because of that name.
Yeah.
It really does kind of spark those thoughts of its predecessor.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, how will this new platform carry on that legacy in today's security environment?
Absolutely. I mean, when you hear Skyraider II, it's not just some made-up name, right?
Yeah.
It immediately takes you back to the A-1 Skyraider, a true legend from Korea
Yeah.
and Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
When you hear Skyraider, you think close air support.
Absolutely.
You think intense situations.
Yeah, the original A-1, I mean, that was a workhorse. Pilots loved it because of how much it could carry, all the different types of ordnance, and just the staying power.
It was a beast.
Oh, yeah, it was a beast for sure.
Yeah.
It became so critical for supporting ground forces. And as you mentioned, especially in Vietnam,
Right.
it was vital for special operations.
Right.
Especially in those, clandestine,
Right.
secret squirrel-type missions
Yeah.
in Laos and Cambodia.
Yeah.
I mean, the A-1's ruggedness, could just keep on ticking.
Yeah.
Even after taking a beating, it was incredible.
And this is what I think is really neat, is that they actually brought in a piece of that history for the Skyraider II delivery.
Oh, wow.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Bill Buse, he was a Vietnam War A-1 Skyraider pilot
Wow.
who was shot down and rescued.
Oh, wow.
They had him at the ceremony.
That's amazing.
I mean, how cool is that?
That's really cool.
To bring in somebody that actually flew the original. And it really does, I think, when you see somebody like that, you realize how tough and versatile that original Skyraider was.
It is a really powerful connection, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, to have someone there who experienced the capabilities and the vulnerabilities of the original Skyraider, to be there when the new one arrives, it adds a whole new level to it that you can't get from just, technical specifications on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It speaks to the legacy.
It does.
I mean, I bet it was inspiring.
Yeah.
For the crews who are going to be flying this new machine.
Now, let's talk about the Skyraider II or the OA-1K. This wasn't something that was, designed from scratch.
Right. Yeah, you're hitting a really important point there. The OA-1K is actually a derivative of the air tractor AT-802.
Interesting.
Which was originally designed for agricultural aviation.
Really?
Think crop dusting.
Wow. So they took a crop duster and turned it into a combat aircraft.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? You take this proven airframe that was designed for a completely different purpose.
Right.
And you adapt it, you transform it for this really demanding military combat role. It speaks to the original design, how sound it was.
So who was it that was tasked with giving this crop duster military teeth?
So the base aircraft itself is still produced by Air Tractor.
Okay.
But the modifications, all the military stuff, the weapon systems, the sensors, communications equipment, all that is done by L3 Harris.
Okay.
And they actually call their version of it the Multi-Mission Skywarden. So it's actually a collaboration. You've got Air Tractor building this rugged airframe, and then you've got L3 Harris with their expertise in defense systems coming together to integrate it all.
When did the first one of these arrive at AS?
FC. So the first mission-ready OA-1K touched down at Hurlburt Field in Florida on April 3rd, 2025.
Okay.
Now, we did actually see an experimental version a few months earlier in January, and that's when it was officially given the name Skyraider II.
Okay.
But April 3rd was the real deal. That was the first operational aircraft ready to go.
That was a little bit later than planned, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're right. They were originally supposed to deliver the first production aircraft back in October 2023.
Right.
So, yeah, it was a bit of a delay. It's not uncommon, though. I mean, when you're developing and integrating, complex military systems onto a platform, even one that's already in production, you got to run into some snags along the way.
And they're not getting as many as they originally planned, were they?
Yeah. So they were initially going to buy 75 OA-1Ks, but they've since scaled that back to 62. And that happened in March of 2024. The Department of Defense. Everyone's always facing resource constraints.
Right.
And it's worth noting that the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, they had actually put out a report expressing some concerns about the original buy.
Okay, so we've talked about the history. We've talked about where it came from, how it was developed, the companies involved. When it showed up the numbers, let's talk about what it can actually do.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
What can this thing do?
So the Skyraider II is what we call a modular combat aircraft. And that modularity is really key here.
Okay.
It's specifically designed for permissive airspace, which basically means areas where the U.S. doesn't face a big threat from enemy air defenses.
Right.
And it have three main roles.
Okay.
Close air support, precision strike against, specific targets, and then armed intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions.
Okay.
Armed ISR. So it can find, fix, and finish targets on its own or in coordination with ground troops.
That's a lot to pack into one airframe.
It is.
How do they make it so versatile?
So it all comes down to that modular design.
Okay.
They can quickly swap out different components depending on the mission. So you could have electro-optical, infrared radar sensors, different kinds of weapons. It can carry up to 6,000 pounds.
6,000 pounds?
Of ordnance on 8 underwing pylons.
Yeah.
And different communications packages. So one day it might be loaded up with high-resolution cameras and Hellfire missiles, and the next it could have different types of bombs and specialized radios.
Wow.
So yeah, that quick reconfiguration, that's a huge advantage.
So how does it do in the air? What's its range? What's its loiter time?
So from what's been reported, it has a combat radius of up to 200 nautical miles.
Okay.
And, for those long ISR missions, it can actually stay on station for up to 6 hours on a typical combat load.
Wow.
And that's really because it's a 2-seat turboprop, so it's super efficient.
Okay.
Compared to, a faster jet.
We always talk about, the modern battlefield. Communications is key. What about this thing? What kind of comms does it have?
So they've packed it with what they call a robust suite of radios and data links.
Yeah.
So it can do line-of-sight communication, direct radio contact, but it can also do beyond line of sight, often using satellite links.
Okay.
So this is so important. For coordinating with ground troops, command centers other aircraft over long distances in different environments.
AFSCOC has really been talking up this aircraft. As far as efficiency goes,
right?
What do they mean by that?
So they're really highlighting the fact that it has a pretty small maintenance footprint.
Okay.
Compared to more complex aircraft. It needs less manpower, fewer specialized tools to keep it up and running, and crucially, it has a lower cost per flying hour.
That's huge.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially compared to some of those legacy special operations platforms or even just conventional aircraft.
Yeah.
It's a much more economical option. And then there's the fact that it can operate from those austere remote airfields with limited infrastructure.
Right.
Which, for special ops.
Yeah.
That's critical.
Now, you hear people talking about the Skyraider II, and they use this term, collapse the stack.
Yes.
Explain what that means.
So collapse the stack. It refers to the idea
of
taking the capabilities of multiple aircraft and putting them all into one.
Oh.
So in the past, you might need a whole stack of aircraft, up to 20 sometimes.
Wow.
To support special operations forces, against violent extremist organizations.
Right.
Some for intel and surveillance, others for electronic warfare, others for, carrying weapons.
Okay.
The OA-1K aims to be a one-stop shop. It integrates all those functions into one aircraft.
So that streamlines everything.
Exactly. Makes communication and coordination so much easier. Reduces complexity and cost.
So it's basically, they want a more agile, more adaptable platform.
Precisely.
That can hang out, gather intel, but then also deliver when it needs to.
That's the goal. And all while being cost effective.
Yeah. So where are we going to see these Skyraider shows in the future?
So the plan is to send additional aircraft to Will Rogers Air National Guard Base in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And they're setting that up as the formal training unit for the OA-1K.
So all the training is going to happen in Oklahoma?
Yeah, that's going to be the hub for all OA-1K pilot and maintainer training.
Now, are they already training people on this?
So they've actually already started familiarizing pilots with a standard air tractor AT-802U.
Okay.
Now keep in mind, this is the basic model. It doesn't have all the fancy L3 Harris modifications that the actual Skyraider IIs will have.
Right.
But this initial training, it lets pilots, get a feel for the aircraft, how it handles the cockpit layout, the basic systems.
And then they'll transition to the full-on military version.
Yep.
Now, we've also heard that the demand for special operations aviators has been really high.
It's through the roof.
Yeah.
AFSOC has said that the demand is exceptionally high. Since 2019, in some cases, it's even higher than it was during the peak of the global war on terror.
Wow.
So, that just highlights how important these kinds of versatile platforms are.
Yeah. Let's zoom out a little bit. Big picture. What are the strategic implications of bringing the Skyraider II into AFSC?
So AFSO sees this as a modular solution to our national security needs. Well, they believe that its adaptability is going to be a key factor in shaping how the U.S. military approaches joint operations, crisis response operations, modern warfare.
They're thinking ahead.
They are. I mean, that emphasis on modularity really shows that they want a platform that can be tailored to all kinds of future challenges, things we know about, things we don't know about yet.
Now, this isn't just for counterinsurgency, is it?
No, they're definitely pushing the idea that the Skyraider II can be used across the spectrum of armed conflict. They're saying that its capabilities could create some real problems for adversaries in lots of different environments.
Not just, fighting insurgents.
Exactly. Not just those low-intensity conflicts.
And there's even been talk about using it for some pretty unusual missions.
Yeah, there's been some chatter about maybe using it for things like signals intelligence or electronic intelligence. Yeah. But those are really just discussions at this point, nothing official. But it does show that they're thinking outside the box, trying to really maximize its potential.
And we've also heard about potential deployments in specific regions like Africa.
Yeah, Senator Mark Kelly has even suggested that the OA-1K could be used to fill an armed ISR gap in the AFRICOM area of responsibility. And, there are growing concerns about extremist organizations in that region.
Right.
So it could be a good fit.
No, it is interesting, though, that they decided to buy this aircraft after we pulled out of Afghanistan.
That is an interesting point. It does make you wonder.
Right.
The strategic emphasis seems to be shifting towards great power competition.
Yeah.
Especially with China in the Indo-Pacific.
Right.
So how does the Skyraider II fit into that?
And they're getting rid of other aircraft to make room for this one.
Right. So to free up the money for the OA-1K, they're retiring the U-28A Draco and some of the Beechcraft King air-based ISR aircraft.
Now they've said that the Skyraider II isn't a direct replacement.
Right. They've been pretty upfront about that.
Yeah.
Which, means there could be some gaps in their capabilities as they transition from the old to the new.
So what are some of the big questions and concerns about this aircraft?
Well, one of the biggest ones is how effective will it be in a high-end fight, against a near-peer adversary with sophisticated air defenses?
Right.
I mean, it's designed for those permissive environments.
Right.
So how will it survive in a more contested airspace?
And what did the GAO say?
Yeah, so the Government Accountability Office, they were worried that SOCOM hadn't really reevaluated the need for the OA-1K after things changed.
Yeah.
After Afghanistan. They basically said, does this aircraft still make sense given the new strategic realities?
And there's also just this ongoing debate about whether a turboprop can really do both armed attack and ISR.
Yeah. I mean, some people wonder if it can really be survivable enough, carry enough payload, have good enough sensors, and still be cost-effective, compared to maybe using drones or more traditional aircraft.
And then there's that big looming question of the geopolitical climate.
Yeah, the world's changing. The focus is shifting away from those lower intensity conflicts where the Skyraider II seemed like such a natural fit.
So how will it adapt?
It's a good question. AFSAC is going to have to be clear about where it fits in and how it contributes to national security.
So the Skyraider II, definitely a noteworthy addition to AFSC's.
It is.
Blending that history. With this modern modular design, we talked about the capabilities. It's adaptable. But there are still a lot of questions.
Yeah, how will it be used? How relevant will it be in the long run?
So what do you all think? What do you see as the primary role for the Skyraider II in the future? How will it adapt to this ever-changing world? Head down to the comments. Let us know what you think. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please share it. Subscribe to the Military Breakdown podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And we've got a whole library of past episodes covering all sorts of defense topics, so go check those out as well. Thanks for listening.